The lawyer's envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Inside were documents that would either save my life or destroy what little family I had left. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but before I could open it, my daughter Victoria burst through my front door without knocking, as she had done every day for the past 3 months. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot to me. Now, let's return to my story. Mom, we need to talk about the house, Victoria said, not even bothering with a greeting. Her designer heels clicked against my worn linoleum floor, the same floor I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees for 30 years. Richard and I have been looking at the market values in this neighborhood. Do you realize you're sitting on a gold mine? Richard, her husband of 2 years, the man who had transformed my sweet, caring daughter into someone I barely recognized. Victoria, I've told you before, this house isn't for sale, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I was 62 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was learning what it meant to set boundaries with my own child. She laughed. Actually laughed. Mom, be realistic, you're getting older. What if you fall? What if you can't take care of yourself? Richard and I think it would be better if you moved into something smaller, more manageable. We could help you find a nice little apartment. More manageable. The words tasted like poison in my ears. What she really meant was cheaper. What she really meant was we want your house. I had raised Victoria alone after her father Thomas died in a construction accident when she was only 7 years old. For 18 years it had been just the two of us against the world. I worked 3 jobs to put her through college. I wore the same coat for 10 winters, so she could have new clothes. I ate cereal for dinner so she could have proper meals. And this was how she repaid me. I'm not moving, Victoria, I said firmly, standing up from my chair. This is my home. Your father and I bought this house together. He died building a future for us. I'm not giving it up. Her expression changed. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. Mom, Richard and I are prepared to help you make this decision. We've already contacted a real estate agent. We've also been talking to some people about your mental state. My mental state. The words hit me like ice water. What are you talking about? Well, you're getting forgetful. Last week you forgot about our lunch date. You've been repeating yourself. Richard thinks you might be showing early signs of dementia. We're just worried about you. I hadn't forgotten that lunch date. Victoria had never called to confirm it, but I suddenly realized what was happening. They weren't just after my house. They were building a case to declare me incompetent. Get out, I whispered. Mom, get out of my house. I screamed, something I had never done to my daughter in my entire life. Get out now, or I'm calling the police. Victoria's face twisted with rage. The mask finally fell completely. You're going to regret this, Mom. You're going to regret choosing this dump over your own daughter. Richard has connections. We can make your life very difficult. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that my late husband's picture fell off the wall. The glass shattered across the floor, and I stood there staring at Thomas's smiling face, feeling like my entire world was crumbling around me. That's when I finally opened the lawyer's envelope. My hands shook as I pulled out the documents inside. What Victoria didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 months ago I had started to suspect something was wrong. I had noticed the way she looked at my house with appraising eyes. I had overheard her on the phone once, talking to Richard about inheritance and market value and accelerating the timeline. So I had done something I never thought I would have to do. I had hired a private investigator. The documents in my hands were the investigator's final report, and what I read made my blood run cold. Richard wasn't just greedy, he was dangerous. The investigator had uncovered that Richard had been married twice before. His first wife had died in a suspicious fall down the stairs. No charges were ever filed, but the insurance payout had been substantial. His second wife had suffered a nervous breakdown and was now in a psychiatric facility. Richard had gotten power of attorney over her assets before she was committed, and now he had his sights set on me. The report included copies of text messages between Victoria and Richard, messages that made me want to vomit. The old lady is more stubborn than we thought, Richard had written. We might need to accelerate the plan. The dementia angle is good. Keep pushing it. Once we get her declared incompetent, The house is practically ours. Victoria's response: she's starting to resist. What if she won't cooperate? Richard, there are ways to handle that. My first wife was stubborn too. These things have a way of working themselves out. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time. I read that message 3 times, each time feeling more nauseated. My own daughter was discussing my potential accident, as casually as if they were planning a vacation. I sat down heavily in my chair, the same chair where I had rocked Victoria as a baby, where I had read her bedtime stories, where I had held her when she cried about her father's death. How had it come to this? The investigator's report continued. Richard was deeply in debt. He owed money to several loan sharks. He had been fired from his last 3 jobs for embezzlement and fraud. He was a con artist, and he had chosen Victoria as his mark because she was vulnerable and had a mother with valuable property. But the worst part was the medical records the investigator had obtained. Richard had been researching medications that could induce dementia-like symptoms. He had purchased several drugs online that could cause confusion, memory loss, and cognitive decline. He was planning to poison me, to slowly drive me insane so he could take everything I owned. I thought about the tea Victoria had been bringing me every day for the past 3 months. The special herbal blend she insisted would help me sleep better. The way I had been feeling foggy and confused lately. The way I kept misplacing things and forgetting conversations. It wasn't age. It wasn't dementia. It was deliberate. They were poisoning me. A coldness settled over my heart, a clarity I hadn't felt in months. If they wanted a war, they would get one, but it would be on my terms. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved 3 weeks ago, when I first started suspecting the truth. Detective Morrison, a professional voice answered. Detective, this is Margaret Richardson. We spoke last month about my concerns regarding my daughter and son-in-law. I'm ready to move forward with everything we discussed, and I have evidence now, lots of evidence. The next 2 weeks were the most difficult of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to let Victoria come over with her poison tea, but now instead of drinking it, I would pour it into a sealed container when she wasn't looking. I documented every drop. I also had to wear a wire. Detective Morrison had obtained a court order allowing me to record my conversations with Victoria and Richard. Every threat, every manipulation, every cold calculation was captured on tape. The hardest part was looking at my daughter and seeing a stranger. The little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them sunshine flowers was gone. In her place was a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to money. During one visit, Richard came with her. It was the first time he'd been to my house in weeks, and I could see the predatory way he examined everything, calculating its worth. Margaret, he said with that oily smile I had come to despise. Victoria tells me you've been resistant to our suggestions about moving. I want you to know we're only thinking of your safety. I smiled sweetly, the wire pressed against my skin under my cardigan. I appreciate your concern, Richard, but I'm quite capable of taking care of myself. His smile tightened. Are you, though? Victoria says you've been very forgetful lately. Confusion is often the first sign of serious cognitive decline. My grandmother had dementia. I know the signs. Your grandmother, I said carefully. Would that be the same grandmother you inherited money from after she died in a nursing home under suspicious circumstances? I watched the color drain from his face. The investigator had done his job well. I knew things about Richard that he thought were buried forever. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Don't you? I continued, my voice still sweet but with an edge now. Just like you don't know about your first wife's fall, or your second wife's convenient breakdown. Victoria stood up abruptly. Mom, what are you saying? You sound paranoid. Do I? I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. Their voices filled my small living room. The old lady is more stubborn than we thought. We might need to accelerate the plan. Victoria's face went white. Richard moved toward me, but I held up my hand. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Richard. Detective Morrison is parked outside. He's been listening to every word of this conversation, and he's very interested in talking to you about several unsolved cases. The next few minutes were chaos. Richard tried to run, but found police officers at my front door and back door. Victoria collapsed onto my couch crying hysterically, claiming she didn't know what Richard had been planning, that he had manipulated her, but I had the text messages, I had her words in black and white. What if she won't cooperate? These things have a way of working themselves out. She had known, maybe not every detail, but she had known enough. As the police led them both away in handcuffs, Victoria looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please, I'm your daughter. Don't do this to me." I stood in my doorway, watching them load her into the police car, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, just a cold, empty space where my daughter used to live in my heart. "I don't have a daughter," I said quietly. "My daughter died the day she decided my life was worth less than a house." The trial was a media sensation. The story of a mother who had to turn in her own daughter to save her life captured national attention. Reporters camped outside my house. My face was on the evening news. The evidence was overwhelming. The poison they had been giving me, the text messages planning my demise, Richard's history of suspicious deaths and insurance payouts. The investigator's testimony was devastating. Victoria tried to claim she was a victim of Richard's manipulation, but the jury didn't buy it. The text messages showed she was an active participant, not a passive victim. Richard was convicted of attempted murder, fraud, and several other charges related to his previous wives. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Victoria was convicted as an accomplice. She received 15 years. 15 years. My daughter would be in her 50s when she got out. If she got out, the day of sentencing, she was allowed to make a statement. She stood before the judge, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to swallow her whole, and she looked at me with eyes full of hatred. "I hope you're happy," she spat. "You destroyed your own daughter's life. What kind of mother does that?" I stood up in the gallery, something the judge would normally never allow, but he let me speak. "What kind of daughter tries to murder her mother?" I asked, my voice echoing through the courtroom. "You made your choices, Victoria. You chose money over love. You chose greed over family. You chose to see me as a target instead of as the woman who sacrificed everything for you." I took a breath, feeling the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on me. "I worked 3 jobs so you could go to college. I wore the same coat for 10 years so you could have new clothes. I went without food so you could eat, and you repaid me by planning my murder." My voice broke, but I continued. "So yes, I destroyed your life, but only because you tried to destroy mine first, and I will never ever apologize for surviving." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked moved. Victoria crumpled, her lawyer having to hold her up. "Mom," she sobbed. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But it was too late for sorry. Some things, once broken, can never be repaired. After the trial, I tried to return to normal life, but nothing was normal anymore. My house felt empty without Victoria, even though she had become a stranger before the arrest. The silence was both peaceful and haunting. I received hundreds of letters. Some were from people supporting me, calling me brave. Others were from people condemning me, saying a real mother would have forgiven her daughter, would have found another way. Those letters hurt the most, because part of me wondered if they were right. Should I have just given up my house? Should I have let them win? Would that have been the more motherly thing to do? But then I would remember the text messages. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time, and I would know that giving up my house wouldn't have been enough. Richard wanted me dead, and Victoria had been willing to let it happen. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Victoria. It was the first time she had tried to contact me since sentencing. "Dear Mom," it began, "I know you probably won't read this, but I need to try. Prison has given me a lot of time to think about what I did, about who I became." I almost stopped reading, but something made me continue. "You were right, about everything. Richard manipulated me, but I let him. I wanted the money. I wanted the easy life, and I convinced myself that you were old, that you had lived your life, that somehow it was okay to take what you had." The letter went on for pages. She detailed how Richard had slowly poisoned her mind against me, how he had made her see me as an obstacle instead of a person, but she also took responsibility for her own choices. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote at the end. "I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt the one person who loved me unconditionally. I destroyed the most precious thing in my life, for money I never even got. She signed it simply Victoria. I sat with that letter for days. I would pick it up, read it, put it down, and then pick it up again hours later. Part of me wanted to forgive her, part of me wanted to write back and tell her I understood, but the larger part of me, the part that had survived her betrayal, knew that forgiveness wasn't something I could give yet, maybe not ever. Instead, I wrote back a single sentence: I hope you find peace, Victoria, but you won't find it with me. It was the last communication we ever had. A year after the trial, I did something unexpected. I sold the house that had been at the center of everything, the house Victoria had wanted so badly, the house I had fought to keep. I sold it and used the money to start a foundation for elderly victims of financial abuse. I called it the Thomas Richardson Foundation, after my late husband. The foundation provides legal help, investigation services, and safe housing for seniors who are being exploited by family members. We've helped dozens of people in the first year alone, people who were facing the same nightmare I had faced. One woman, Patricia, came to us after her son had forged her signature on documents, transferring her home to his name. Another man, Robert, had been locked in his own basement by his daughter, while she emptied his bank accounts. Every person we helped felt like a small redemption. I couldn't save my relationship with Victoria, but I could save others from the same fate. The irony wasn't lost on me. Victoria had wanted my house so badly that she was willing to kill for it. And in the end, I gave it away, not to her, but to help people she would have victimized. 2 years after everything happened, I moved into a small apartment near the foundation's office. It was a fraction of the size of my old house, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived since Thomas died. I decorated it with photos of Victoria, from when she was little, the Victoria who brought me dandelions, the Victoria who cried on my shoulder when her father died, the Victoria who told me I was the best mom in the world. That Victoria was gone, but I wanted to remember that she had existed once, before greed and Richard and terrible choices destroyed her. I also kept one thing from my old house, the chair where I had rocked her as a baby. It sat in my small living room, a reminder of both what I had lost and what I had survived. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in that chair and wonder if I could have done something differently, if there was a moment where I could have saved her from herself. But I always came back to the same conclusion: you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You can't love someone into being a better person, and you certainly can't sacrifice yourself on the altar of someone else's greed. 5 years after the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a social worker at the prison, where Victoria was serving her sentence. Ms. Richardson, I'm calling because your daughter has been very ill. She's been diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer. The prognosis isn't good. She's asked if you would be willing to visit her. I sat down heavily, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. Cancer. My little girl had cancer. For a moment, all the anger and hurt disappeared, and I was just a mother whose child was dying. I'll be there tomorrow, I heard myself say. The prison visiting room was exactly as depressing as I had imagined. Gray walls, metal tables, guards watching everything. And there, sitting at a table in the corner, was Victoria. She looked so small. Prison and illness had stripped away everything familiar. Her hair was thin from chemotherapy. Her face was gaunt. She looked 20 years older than her 37 years. When she saw me, tears immediately started streaming down her face. "Mom," she whispered. "You came." I sat down across from her, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "How are you feeling?" I finally asked, the mother in me unable to help the instinct to care. "I'm dying," she said simply. "They say I have maybe 6 months. Maybe less." The words hung between us like a death sentence, which, I suppose they were. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and betrayal, I didn't want my daughter to die. "Mom," she said, reaching across the table. I let her take my hand. I need to tell you something. I need you to know that every day I've been in here, I've regretted what I did. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you." She took a shaky breath. "Richard is a monster, but I'm not innocent. I knew what we were planning was wrong. I knew it, and I did it anyway, because I wanted money more than I wanted to be a good person." "Why?" I asked, the question I had wanted to ask for 5 years. "Why wasn't my love enough?" She started crying harder. "It was enough, Mom. It was always enough. But Richard made me believe I deserved more. He made me believe you were holding me back. He made me believe that your life was less valuable than our future." She wiped her eyes with her prison uniform sleeve. "But he was wrong, and I was wrong. And now I'm dying in prison. And all I can think about is how I wasted my life chasing money I never needed." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her life in prison, about the therapy she had been receiving, about how she had finally started to understand the magnitude of what she had done. "The other inmates know about my case," she said. "They know I tried to kill my own mother. Some of them have kids they haven't seen in years, and they hate me for what I did. They say I'm the worst kind of person. Are they wrong?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No, they're not wrong. What I did was monstrous, and I have to live with that, or I guess die with that." As our visiting time came to an end, she asked me one final question. "Mom, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the little girl who used to sit on my lap and listen to bedtime stories. I saw the teenager who had cried in my arms after her first heartbreak. I saw the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive what you did, but I can tell you this. I never stopped loving you. Even when I hated what you had become, even when I was terrified of you, I never stopped being your mother." We talked about her childhood, about her father, about the good times before everything went wrong. We never talked about Richard, or the trial, or what might have been. In her final weeks, when she was too weak to get out of bed, I was allowed extended visits. I would sit beside her hospital bed in the prison infirmary, and hold her hand, just like I had when she was a sick child. "Mom," she said one day, her voice barely a whisper, "thank you for not giving up on me. Even after everything, you came back. You're my daughter." I said simply. That never changed. She died on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. Her final words were, "I'm sorry, Mommy." The funeral was small, just me, a chaplain, and 2 other inmates who had become Victoria's friends in prison. Richard was not notified. As far as I was concerned, he had killed my daughter long before cancer did. Standing at her grave, looking at the headstone that read, "Victoria Ann Richardson, beloved daughter," I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Grief, for the woman she could have been, relief that her suffering was over, sadness for all the wasted years. But I also felt something unexpected. I had done the right thing by turning her in. I had saved my own life, and potentially the lives of others Richard might have targeted, but I had also done the right thing by coming back when she was dying, by giving her the chance to make peace before the end. Some people might say I should have forgiven her sooner. Some might say I should never have forgiven her at all, but I had found a path that felt right for me, holding her accountable while still holding on to love. That night, I sat in my old chair, the one from my house, and I thought about everything that had happened, from the first suspicions to the trial, to Victoria's death. It had been a 7-year nightmare, but I had survived, and I had built something meaningful from the ashes of my broken family. The Thomas Richardson Foundation had helped hundreds of people by then. We had expanded to 3 locations. We had stopped dozens of cases of elder abuse. We had given hope to people who thought they had no option. Victoria's betrayal had taught me something important, that love isn't weakness, but love without boundaries is dangerous. That family is important, but self-preservation is not selfish. That forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and moving on doesn't mean pretending it never happened. I'm 70 years old now. 8 years have passed since that day when Victoria walked into my kitchen demanding I sell my house. The foundation is thriving. I've written a book about my experience that helps other families recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. I live quietly in my small apartment with my old chair and my memories. Some of those memories hurt, some of them heal, all of them have made me who I am. People often ask me if I regret turning in my own daughter. The answer is complicated. I regret that it had to happen. I regret that she made choices that left me with no other option. I regret that greed and manipulation destroyed what could have been a beautiful relationship. Victoria's grave is a 20-minute drive from my apartment. I visit once a month, bringing flowers and talking to her as if she can hear me. I tell her about the people we've helped at the foundation. I tell her about my life. I tell her I love her, because despite everything, despite all the pain and betrayal, and horror, she was still my daughter, and I was still her mother. That's a bond that not even attempted murder could completely sever. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The end.